Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. We're dealing with Module 10, which happens to be the last module in our ethical hacking journey, according to Cisco's The Ethical Hacker course. The title of this particular module is Tools and Code Analysis. If I were to break it down properly, I would say it's first of all tools analysis and then code analysis. Code analysis is a very, very interesting thing, particularly for people who have engaged some form of building of applications or building of softwares, who are into development operations or DevOps. It's a very, very important aspect of programming. The reason is because it gives you an insight into the structuring of every application. There's something that comes to mind immediately when I talk about tools and code analysis, and that's called the use case, right? And use case is a term that is used for describing how interaction happens between either a user, right, and a system, or a system and a system. When we say a user, it will be you who is the person attempting to use the service, right? And the service you are using is hosted on the system. So the interaction or the interaction between you who is using that system and the system which you're using is where use case comes in because it focuses on sequence of actions, right, that lead to an outcome. So let's paint a picture. You will go to the shop to buy bread. That's the mind. And I want to now automate this going to the shop to buy bread. So I must identify a use case. What's the case of the use? So what I want to do is I'm sitting down, depending on where I'm at. I can say I'm at home or in a car or perhaps even taking a walk, right? And then I attempt to want to purchase bread, right? So what I'll need to do is locate a shop where bread is sold, right? That is if I want to buy it from. Okay, well, let's say I want to buy bread from a shop, right? As a case. So I would have to locate the shop where bread is sold, get into the shop, and then of course there'll be options of bread. Then I'll decide what bread it is I want to buy, get to know the price tag, then pay. At the point of payment, what are the options of payment? Cash, transfer, or use of POS. These are all processes that are involved. Once I'm done with purchasing it, what I need to do now is that I'll be given the bread, perhaps given the receipt, and then I walk out of the shop with the shop. So these are how do I put it now? Sequence of actions or events that lead to the outcome. Now the outcome is I want to get bread. The outcome is we leave there with bread. So the sequence of action leading to purchasing the bread is what we try to capture in use case. And it has a lot of components or elements as the case may be. And this use case is very, very important for people who do software development, people who perhaps even deploy or prepare business processes, right? People who, of course, also design systems, right? So, and they do that because the focus is to be able to, identify functionality from the perspective of the user, right? How do I put it? Yes, yeah, how do I put it? Just largely to be able to identify from the user's point of view, as a user, what is the case of use for this particular thing you want to deal with? Everybody who is perhaps in this place have attempted one business or the other. And one of the perspectives you want to identify is from the user's point of view, how does what I provide solve their issue, solve their case? Okay. So you have to sit down and look at the processes or the sequence of actions that lead to your provision of that stuff. And there are quite a number of things that are contained inside. You have to identify the person buying it, right? Or using that device, which in this case is the actor. Then you must identify the purpose of the objective, right? Um, that you want to achieve, which in this case is what we can call maybe a goal or a target. Then you must set up an event or a scenario, right? Hold on, please. All right. So you have to identify, thirdly, a scenario, which is a detailed description of maybe the conversations or the interactions that happen between that guy or the person who's going to use the device or use that particular system and the system. Okay, we're talking of use case. Okay, then of course you have to do certain preconditions. Say maybe like in the case of the purchase of bread, you can say there must be bread there, then the person must have money. Okay, so bread has to be available. These are preconditions. Then the person must have money. When he thinks of getting bread, he should have money. That's a precondition. Then he has to walk to the shop. That's a precondition. Then the shop must have bread, right? On display for sale. It's a precondition. Then the person has to pay, which is a precondition. So all of these things are captured in the precondition. Then there's also, post condition. So these are quite some elements. You can read that up. I'm just throwing that in to be able to help explain the topic we're dealing with, which is tools and code analysis, right? So use case. And then at some point, you're going to also identify exceptions, perhaps even also identify the system itself that it works with. So, and all of what I've just explained is not in any particular order, but with respect to identifying the sequence of actions or events that lead to an outcome, which in this case is what we define as use case, it's very important that this comes in, right? So let me do this. Okay, great. I want to be seeing the number of people who are in class. Can you hear me? Please, if you can hear me, just indicate by thumbs up. Let me just be certain that I'm not talking, to myself with the hope that okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Victoria. All right. So, the topics, is quite large. I don't expect that we're going to finish it. And I said earlier that I would have preferred a situation where if I were to take a class and you asked me to structure it because of the understanding I'm hoping to achieve, right? Thank you, JB. Right, the objective I'm hoping to achieve, I would have introduced this topic first, right? And that's from my own bias, from the point of hoping that people begin to develop their, tools that they're going to use. So we're going to look at whatever tool people use and the code, right? We're going to look at it and then look at the steps into analyzing them, right? So that's what this topic is about. That's tools and code analysis. So these are the topic titles we're dealing with. We're looking at, I'm going to also attempt to explain what tools and code analysis is. I jumped into it just far inside when I talked about use case scenario or use case. So we're going to be looking at understanding the basic concept of scripting and software development. Okay, so perhaps taking a journey into the mind of the people that develop the scripts or the tools or the tools or the codes, as it were. Each tool has within it certain codes that carry out certain actions. So towards the end, I think in the last part, you'd see different types of tools that are available for penetration testing, right? And which is why I'll say this again because I don't know the journey you all have taken to this point, but I'd advise that with regards to penetration testing, don't jump into it thinking you have got it after this whole journey. And there's no possibility of us even achieving everything, but I would say dedicate time to it. Read a lot. There are quite a number of how do I put it now? Publications out there that help improve this learning. Okay. So we're going to start with understanding the basic concept of scripting and software development. Then we're going to look at understanding the different use cases of penetration testing tools and analyze explicit code. Yes, somebody has a question. All right, thank you. Okay, FL sound. Okay, so let's move on. Before we start, the chapter we're going to be dealing with right now, or the part of the chapter is understanding the basic concept of scripting and software development. And that cannot happen without attempting to explain code analysis or tools analysis. Okay, so typically we can say for the purpose of understanding, this is on record so that you can always refer to it. Code analysis would be the steps, did I say steps or processes involved in evaluating, inspecting, and let's say examining software. Okay? Or let's say software and software tools. Because some software are actually tools. They are built as tools for you to use. Most of what we'll be talking about here are tools. Okay. I think it also focuses on codes, especially source code. And the source code, of course, will be the heart or the engine of every application or software that you use, which is what some people can lay claim to as their proprietary product. I can choose to make open the code, which is the source from where my application works or my software works, or decide to not make it open. So we have these two categories of people who have this open source and the closed source or the proprietary, right? But what analysis of any code focuses on, or tools focuses on, which is tools or code analysis, is largely attempting to inspect a tool or a code, right? Evaluate that code and examine the code, right? And what you're attempting to do, why you do that, is for lots of reasons. I mentioned while we're talking, this is also getting to that portion now, that every application, every tool, every software, every product at the point of development is more or less the best. Then it jumps into the market and it becomes obsolete. Obsolete as per, okay, no, obsolete might not be the word. It may fall short of what it was created to achieve. Reason being that there's evolution in this field, and this evolution might have swallowed the posture of that application, right? So you just imagine how many on the lighter note, just imagine how many styles of clothes you have made. And the time you were making them, it was the gang. Then after making it, you realize that, man, a new style just came out, right? Look at phones, for example. They make a phone and they tell you it's the best phone. And if it were the best phone, of course, we should just relax it forever. But then some months down the line, they notice certain weaknesses or in incapacity, is that so inadequacies with that particular thing that they released. And then they now start thinking, hey, you know what? How about we do something to improve on what we've done? So that's why this thing is very important. Code analysis is very, very important. Remember, it focuses on attempting to examine codes, right? Attempting to inspect the codes, attempting to also evaluate the code with the aim of perhaps identify certain defects that are in that code or the tool, also to improve quality of that code, right? And improve on performance. Then also, very importantly, ensure that that code is in compliance with standards. And these standards are coding standards. So very, very important. This is what code analysis focuses on. So it is sometimes, what you can do manually, or again, write scripts or codes to do that. Interesting. So for whoever does any form of software development, right, it's very, very important that you focus on. It's a very crucial stage. And with the hope of producing very reliable, secure applications, or even, let's say, dependable application, it's very, very important to do some form of analysis. Very important. There are quite a number of things that are involved there. Okay, I think I'll come back to it once we begin to advance. But let's dive into the topic and see what we're achieving here. Okay, so now to work successfully as a penetration tester, you need to be familiar with coding. Now, this is where a great number of people will just pull out, because coding is work, requires a lot of thinking, a lot of analysis, a lot of reasoning, most especially scripting languages. Although knowledge of common compiled language is also a plus, there are two major reasons for this. First, right, every malicious software or malware is a code. Somebody sits down and identifies a weakness or a vulnerability in your system, in your application, or in your network, and decides to take advantage of the conversation that occur between every user and that particular service, the application, the network infrastructure, or a computer or a device. Then they look at the automated conversations that these guys have and then write a code to carry out the function that the application is going to do it. So some of them are compiled, some of them are just a script. When we say compiled, it means that there are a series of scripts that work together, leading to one process to the other. Although threat actors do as much as they can to obfuscate their code to make it hard to identify and interpret, once you're a skilled penetration tester, you can decipher it. That's what we're looking at here. So you look at the conversations that happen. So let me try to paint a picture, for example. You know, if somebody's trying to mimic the president's speech, haven't had, or let's no, let me not, let maybe not a president's speech. Let's assume that you have wives, or you have children, or you have loved ones, right? If somebody attempts to mimic your loved one's voice, at some point they may fool you because to start with, they begin to sound like your loved one because they've practiced it so much, right? The next thing is to begin to identify the tone, right? The undulating flow of the person's voice texture. You can tell, this is not a person, but you try you. Somebody can do that on the phone with you, right? So if you live in a house where you have growing children and the children are beginning to mature, so usually the boys, their voice begins to deepen. And if they're anything like their dad, they begin to sound like their father. There are tendencies that the child can say something and the mother would think it was the father who said it, only to check and no, there's a feel that my husband has to this talk when he says it this way. Okay, so attackers or threat actors always attempt to hide these conversations to make it look like they spoof the conversations that occur between the devices, right? Or between the user and the system, or the user and the application, or user and the service. However, with this training, with this level of focus given to this analysis, you're able to identify that this is a fake. So we also need to understand that the code, right, does something. Whatever it does, we need to understand what it does. Because the code is actually an instruction given for a particular response to be gotten, right? So once you see a code, you can tell, this guy is trying to attempt to get, to put, to pull, as the case may be. So if somebody creates the code, understanding what the code does, right, it helps you to be able to identify what it is targeting. So we also need to understand what the code does because it has possibly created weaknesses or vulnerabilities and perhaps even persistent access to our client system that we will need to know about. The other reason is that we often need to automate form of intelligence gathering or reconnaissance and weakness identification or vulnerability scanning to make our test more efficient and effective. So efficient is doing the work well. If doing the work, effective is doing the work well. Although automated scanning tools already exist, they don't always give us what we need. Remember, I mentioned before that they are tools, right? It's like this. It's like going out to a restaurant to eat a particular meal and cooking the meal at home. They are two separate things. While the other takes away the ease, or what the other one introduces the ease of not getting your hands dirty, which is going out to eat. Having to cook it at home means that you're going to spend gas. You'd buy the ingredient, you spend time and cook it. But the beauty of doing it at home is that you're going to have excess of it and you can do it to the taste that you want. Out there, it could be too salty, too seasoned, too oily, or as the case may be. But if you're doing it at home, it may just, be able to add some level of largesse to it. So you will need to be able to recognize what our existing automation scripts do. So if you use a tool, like all the tools we're trying to download and say, okay, what does this tool do? What tool do I need? Well, I think towards the end, there's a tool that we can use for password cracking. I'll at some point just leaf through it, right? So if you now understand what each code, knowing that a malware is a code or every script, right, is written to achieve a particular thing, understanding the structure, right, you can now modify them to fit your current need, or you can even write your own. This is why I hope that will all actually be. Okay, so let's move on. Now, there's what's called logic construct. And your logic constructs are very, very important with respect to the sequence or order in which instructions actually occur. So logic is actually flow of discussions or flow of thoughts that target a particular outcome. So that's a logic. So somebody you're having a conversation with somebody, you want to identify the person's logic, like what are you hoping to achieve? Then if somebody begins to talk, because typically when you are having a conversation with somebody, you want to know where the person is going to land. Then that informs whether you listen or preempt a question or even ask a question or begin to guide the thoughts towards where it's going to go. So programming, right? Logic constructs are the building blocks that include the sequence or order in which instructions occur and are processed. The path a program takes when it is running, and the iteration, or what we call repeated execution of a section of the code. If somebody's iterating it, right? If something has to happen again, paint a picture. You go to your ATM machine. The natural thing is that you have to take your ATM card and insert it into that box, right? So that perhaps there's already a script or a program or a construct of the logic of how that works. So naturally, it's like, hey, so the use case captured this guy using an ATM machine, takes his ATM card, inserts it into the ATM card. What should happen when the person inserts it, right? There must be a logic. That logic is constructed and it is written and the automation begins. So naturally, once you insert your ATM card into the machine comes up with some form of interface, and then you may hear a voice, which they've actually been disabled in some machines. You hear, please enter your secret number, indicating or inferring that the form of thought here is for somebody to access the use of this machine, insert a card which comes with a pre-configured secret number, which if the person inserts, allows the person access to the next line or next construct, next logic in our construct, right? So, and then goes on, you insert the card, of course, you punch in your number, and then it brings out options of what you want to do. Then there are lots of options, and each of those options have its own construct or its own building block, or let's say sequence or order in which you're going to carry. So if you're looking at account balance, the option is there. If you're looking at withdrawal, it's there. If you're looking at other, what's it called? There's lots of options there. Transfer, airtime, all of those functions are there. So this is what we're looking at. So most programming languages include the following logic construct. Number one, there's what's called a loop. There's what's called conditionals. There are Boolean operators. There are string operators. There are arithmetic operators, and the rest of them. So the loops actually are used to. There are certain actions that are that need to be executed repeatedly, right? A certain function of your code, right? Repeatedly, right? Maybe for while, for those of you who understand some scripting languages, right? Then there are conditionals, which are usually used for handling decisions, right? So you have some if, then, right? Or, okay? Then no, if, then. They have the Boolean operators, which are more or less, simple words used as conjunctions. And they sometimes focus on and, or, not, and, not. There's and not, or and or not, right? Boolean. Then there are strings. Usually, those ones are used to manipulate variables in various useful ways. Okay. Arithmetic operators perform mathematical operations like addition, subtraction, and the rest of them. So these are constructs, right? Logics that happen. So if you sit down with somebody, having a concept is as good as sitting down and constructing it and then deciding what line of thought this goes. So everybody who has a tool out there that you use for penetration testing has a mind. That is part of why I'm saying that sometimes you can go ahead and download a particular application to use, and you would have just given them more information than you can think, because not all tools are actually friendly. Some tools are actually given to you to be able to create like a door that allows them have access, backdoor and all. Part of the reason why we told you to, as much as possible, desist from using cracks. That brings us to data structures, right? So data structure is simply the structure, right, that is used, or yeah, the structure that is used in most programming language. I have quite a lot of them. There's JSON or JavaScript option notation, right? Those ones are normally used for storing and transporting of data, right? We also have arrays, which is normally is a variable that holds more than one value at a time. We have dictionaries. We're going to deal with them one after the other as we move on. Dictionaries are more like a collection, right, of data values, right? And they sometimes are ordered using some pair. So you might have like, for example, there will be say maybe name and phone number, name, email address, and the rest of them. Then there's the CSV format, which is the comma separated values, normally used for characters, right? And how do I put it now? Cells that interact with each other. So is it cells now? Yeah, boxes with distinct values that have to interact at some point where they meet with each other. Then there are trees, right? They're normally used to represent nodes. Then brings us to library. What's the library? Library is a collection of resources that can be used or reused by programs. And once it's used at first, you can come back to it to use, like what your library is, like a collection, right? And collection of different scripts or different codes or different syntaxes that can be called on and used. So libraries can include the following: codes that were already written before, now pre-written codes, configuration information, subroutines, documentation and help information, message templates, and then classes. Okay. Again, remember, we're not dealing with programming here, but this is just introducing what is needed for basic concept of scripting, right? Understanding it. Then there's what's called a procedure. It's a selection of code that is created to perform a specific task, can be used several times without throughout a program, right? Used several times. Then can also make code simpler and more concise. It's a procedure. Typically, they are very similar in nature, especially looking at functions, right? And then in some programming languages, functions and procedures are practically the same thing. In fact, let's say some people actually know functions as procedures and procedures as functions. So there's a tutorial for this, right, on this link. Let me attempt to copy it and drop it in the, excuse me. Let me drop it in the chat group now so that you can actually look at that to help you in your own time of reading. So let me resume, right? I'm going to go ahead and drop it. I think I've just dropped it. Now it's going to be dropping very shortly, right? Where are we at? Ethical hacking. Okay, so I just dropped it there. So you can look at it and it will help you. It's just a tutorial, okay, for all of this. Let's move. Function is a block of code that is very useful when you need to execute similar tasks over and over. Function runs only when it is called. And by calling means that you initiate using it. So that's what we call calling. Following a few resources you can use to learn about functions in different programming language. Again, let me drop this in the group so that you can, for Python, we have functions. For Java, we have functions. For Bash and then PowerShell. I think I have slides on them that I'm going to just talk about very shortly. I just dropped those ones again in the group. These are different links and they will be of help to you. Just click on them and study at your own time. Right. Let's move on. So classes or a class is a code template that can be used to create different objects. It provides initial values for member variables and functions or methods. And a class is like a blueprint for creating objects, meaning something that's been tried, right, and tested. It forms a guide, right? Like we said, it's a template, it's a code template. So you can take a class. So you can look at a class case for maybe market or sales. You can look at a class case for perhaps, let's say, um, um, penetration testing, reconnaissance tools, all of those exist. So different programming language have their own classes. Now, analysis of script and code samples for use in penetration testing is what I want to deal with. And I'm going to attempt to look at this from identifying components of tools and code analysis, right? So since it's been recorded, you can actually use this when you listen to it, or you could even write now. So we have, for example, we can identify components, right? One of it is static code analysis, right? So please note this. I'm also still in the process of mastering most of this, but I'll attempt to, as an instructor, communicate to you what I gleaned from my learning process. Okay. So it means what I'm saying is not final authority, but is a strong guide and to lead you into deeper understanding of this subject, of this topic title. And it will help, really, really help. So I would say components of code analysis, or let's say looking at analysis of a script and code samples, right? One of it is static code analysis. This is where you identify the source code without executing it. You just look at the source code and try to understand it. You focus on the syntax, you focus on the structure, and then also identify, for example, if it is in compliance with standards for coding, right? You have dynamic code analysis, which is like the direct opposite of what we talked about. At this point, this is what you do. You know, in the case of static, it means the code is not being run, right? You interact with it in a static state. In dynamic code analysis, what you're focusing on is, at this point, it is being executed. So you're executing the code. What you're focusing on is run the code to evaluate the behavior while it is running. What's going to be its behavior? What we call runtime behavior, right? And what you're focusing on here is, now that this application is running, how is it performing? What it's the use of memory that it is having. When we say memory now, looking at your RAM, looking at your processor, How much of it is it consuming? Then also very importantly, does it return any form of error while we're executing it, right? So another thing we look at again is analysis of the security or security analysis of the code. This is where you're identifying weaknesses in the code base, right? We have database. This is the code base, the base of in that you want to look at it. Like if this code is running, what are the weaknesses that are very likely to exist or that exist? And these ones could perhaps be what an attacker exploits. Okay. Then we can look at the quality assessment of the code. Okay. This is where you're looking at now this code, we've been able to run, check it when it is static, we've been able to run when it's dynamic, when it's running. We've identified the security and the security issues with it. Now, what is the quality of the code? Focusing now at how the applications can read it, right? And how it can be maintained. Okay. So you want to identify that. Then some people actually mistake the quality analysis with performance analysis, which are not the same, right? The quality is just focusing on how we can evaluate how the maintain ability, if I'm allowed to use that word, of the code, right? Then in performance analysis, we're looking at how efficient, particularly with respect to execution time, with respect to resource usage, and with respect to how it can scale if I change the system or put it in a new environment. Okay. Then we can look at with respect to, let's say, this particular code. If I introduce an external module, an external library, right, to this, how does it identify it? Does it identify it as outdated, insecure, or incompatible? This is where we're looking at dependency analysis. Okay. Then we'll look at in terms of integrating it with another component or system, how seamlessly does it integrate? Somebody's asking a question. No, I'm not. I'm not. This what I have on the screen. What I have on the screen is just I'm attempting to, like I said, I'm attempting to explain to you elements of code analysis. You get? So what we have on the screen is actually analysis of scripts and code samples that are used in penetration testing. So I'm saying that when you as a pen tester are interacting with a particular code or a script or an application, right? Or a tool, what I'm discussing here are the things you should look at. These are steps, or no, not steps. They're elements that you look out for in every code. So I'm not sharing any slide. So I'm just discussing. So you can refer to the recording later or write as we discussed. Okay. So I think I just talked about dependencies, right? How that a particular code or a script, it can interact with other modules that are imported or that it is imported into external ones, right? So it reviews external libraries, right? And identifies whether they are outdated to its operation, whether they are insecure to its own operation or incompatible with it. Okay. Sometimes you actually try to use certain applications and you hear it is incompatible with this, use this particular version for that. Okay. You see that a lot happening when you're trying to download, especially virtual machines, VMware or the other one, Oracle Box, VirtualBox. Some of you have 32 bit operating system, some have 64 bit. Some of you also need some form of Python script to run before it can actually run. I had the case with somebody which attempted to help sort, and we sorted that out. Okay. The next thing I want to look at is integration analysis. So if I'm integrating this particular code, right, with components of the system that already exist, how seamlessly does it interact? Okay. So that's what I was attempting to look at here. And why all of this is very important is because it helps in the event that you're actually developing or even trying to use a code. It is very important because it narrows down the process of perhaps even developing a script or even fixing issues with a script or a code, so that when you have any form of security or software security issues, right, the overall quality is checked against industry standards or compliance standards, code compliance standards. And this may sound like French to quite a number of people listening to this recording. This is simply because you may not have engaged scripting, right? And even if you did it academically. There are some places where they actually write scripts on the board, and run it on the board. They just shall write and say, if you run it, it will give you this, but you've not tested or run it and you cannot really tell what is returning. Okay. So these are the things we look at for code analysis. Very important. And I would, again, as we move, I would attempt to at some point explain in detail what I mean, looking at static code analysis, looking at dynamic code analysis, looking at, and the rest of them, right? I think there are about 7 points that I mentioned there, right? So let's continue. So two of the best ways to become familiar with Bash, Python, Ruby, PowerShell, Perl, or JavaScript languages are by creating your own scripts and inspecting scripts created by others. So let me flip it. Inspect scripts written by others and then attempt to create your own. This is why I said earlier, you will need to have your own lab. When we say lab, it's not like going to buy devices. You can actually get the system, download the VirtualBox, import, it's hard to get them. If you have to get very good network connection. That's usually our problem because they are very heavy. They have is the image of an operating system. You can easily find scripts to inspect by navigating through GitHub. There's a guy there, Omar Santos. His repository is like what a lot of people are using right now. So you can find and inspect script by navigating through GitHub. Look at this. Let me drop this there. We've actually done some of this. I think we've mentioned some of this before. Let me do this and post it in the group as well for navigation to be able to learn what can actually assist you in looking at scripts that already exist, right? And to tell you what this script is hoping to achieve. And so if you look at it, you can actually build yours and you can focus on certain variables. The Bash shell is a command shell and a language interpreter that is available for operating systems such as Linux, Mac operating system, and even Windows. Now, when people talk about, I think we talked about that. Bash is actually born again shell. I discussed it at one time when I was talking about interactions with operating systems, right? Structures of a Linux operating system. So the Bash is an acronym for Born Again Shell, named after the guy who developed it, right? So a shell is a command line tool that allows for interactive or non-interactive execution of commands. Okay, so most of what we do for people that use Windows is click. That click, whether right click using a mouse or even using your tab or keyboard, whatever you do is actually going to be interpreted. So there's a series of stuff that you do that amounts to a particular end. But you did it in succession. There is a portion of your operating system that will have to look at those combination of instructions that you introduced and attempt to interpret it as being this. You all have friends, and there are certain codes that you all have which is not common to everybody. It could be the sign of the eye. Sometimes it could be a thing you say on the phone, or it could be a particular status you post, and then somebody knows exactly what's up because you guys have that language within yourself. The reason being that there is a section of you that knows that the combination of this, and this equals this, right? So having a good background in Bash enables you to quickly create scripts, parse data, and automate different tasks and can be helpful in penetration testing engagement. The following websites provide examples of Bash script concepts, tutorial examples and cheat sheets. So let me again drop it for you. So you realize that even if you are going to spend like the next 2 months reading these resources I've sent to you, you agree with me now that you exhausting it and mastering it is going to be it's not impossible, but it's a tough one. Very impossible. Very, very possible. It's a tough one. Okay. So I've been dropping links in the group to help you in your reading. Right, let's move on. Now, Python is another program, right? There are resources to learn Python. So this is another group you can Python. There's a class of Python that we have on the Cisco platform for those who are interested. Of course, when you discuss with the people who are there, I think it comes at a fee, I'm certain. So if you're interested, cool. So let me copy this again and also drop them for you. Comprehensive list of Python to let you understand that this thing is not very hard, right? I have a son who I exposed to Python during the holiday, during the long vacation. He's currently building games, and he'll look at the game and then look at what they have structured as some form of template, right? And builds his own stuff. And he's been doing work. I just want him to focus on reading yet. He'll do it, but let him get some. In this world that we live in, academics are very important. Without some quality, we'll go far. right? So, but that's to let you understand it's not tough. It's not that tough, except of course you have a lot of engagements, parents, children, school runs, buying of fuel, fueling generator in the country that we live in. It becomes very tough to sit with it. You go check now Python I want learn, I want fuel I want buy, right? So there's Ruby. Ruby is another programming language. These are resources for Ruby as well, right? I'm trying to just quickly go through this so I can land where I really want to land tonight. Okay, so I'm dropping the resources for you. It's going to be of help. They might be might look like they are stressful, but hey, okay. So that's for Ruby, used for web and other types of applications. So these are websites that help you in learning. PowerShell is for Windows, like Microsoft.com. A lot of people don't really take this seriously, but it's okay. That's because for pen testers or even people who want to be cybersecurity guys, Windows is actually, not a very good place to sit. Not that it is bad, though. It's just that you just be using tools. But if you're using Linux, you can actually understand the structure of those tools and interact with them. Okay, so then there's also Perl. Perl is for programming language used for building a lot of applications and resources. So I'm going to also put this here, tutorials on Perl and the rest of them. Perl has been around for a while. First time I engaged seeing Perl was as early as, I think it was 2004, thereabout, which at the point they were using it for building web pages and the rest and setting services, right? Mail services and FTP services back then. All right, so there's JavaScript. Okay, so JavaScript. So let me give you also the resource for JavaScript. So guys, you just drop inside here. You go. Well, they are not very heavy. Oh. They are stuff you can look at. And hey, I'm dropping it there. We don't know. Somebody can actually use them. Okay, so they're all in the group now, and you can interact with them at your spare time while you are reading. So let's dive. So there's a lab, and this lab is actually to exploit code analyze exploit codes, interpret some scripts and command that are entered in the shell. It just helps you develop depth of knowledge regarding penetration testing softwares and the tools and how they are structured, right? So, and then that's also for automation code, looking at Bash, Python, Ruby. They're all labs in the curriculum. When you read, those labs are there. Attempt to do them, please, they help. Now, it brings us to this part, understanding the different use case of penetration testing and tools that are used for exploit. So analyzing exploit code. So I'm going to, at this point, I listed some points earlier, and those points are with respect to code analysis. Okay. So it's tools and code. Tools and code. So most of the tools that you use are coded, meaning scripts are written that are piled and then they are compiled. And it actually forms a procedure of action for those applications or those tools. So I'm going to look at them and I'll attempt to explain again. However, let's start here. One of the big challenges in our profession is finding the right tool for the job. That's where, and this field is quite large. You just imagine medics sitting down. Imagine what it was like trying to find the cure to the cure to infection. Imagine the test they had to go through, what worked and what failed, and how many lives they lost, and how many, and all of this stuff. But however, you need to understand that with time, and also with your mastery over each of the tool, there are certain tools that work for you. So I usually don't buy the idea of somebody telling that this tool does this, which is what most people want. Humans are actually more comfortable with methods or tested methods. So you want to come into a class and they tell you it's penetration testing. Typically, they'll say at the end of the class you should know how to do penetration testing, which is what a lot of people have used to sell trainings or sell platforms that you pay money for, and towards the end you realize you wasted time. There was a training I engaged in, and my boss sent the link to me, and I clicked on it, and hey, I loved the whole payment arrangement. The team took me from there. I clicked on it, he listed the course. Next time I clicked on it, it's okay, go ahead and register for the course, and then told me 25,000 naira. It's okay, make I just pay. I clicked on it. It took me to a payment gateway, and I'm like, wow, if this guy spent this time to sort out this payment, ma'am said the training will wow. I entered the class the first 3 days. I was wondering well, it wasn't what I paid for. And at the end, I left the class. So sometimes I can sell you a language that tells you are going to achieve all of this in such a number of days. That thing is normally a lie. I put it to you. But then we may not hear because typically people want to get it and run away and go and practice something. The best way is come into a class, get the tools that they sent to you. Exactly what I ordered versus what I got. That was the case. You know, in short, this one I didn't even get it. Self, I shall dash them that money, and it was some hard-earned money. So it happens like that, right? So please, as much as possible, don't just jump into the frenzy of saying, "Okay, now I'm a pen tester." You're not yet. You know what? The only way you could have been a pen tester is to understand the tools. That I'm trying to underscore the point is a big challenge in our profession, finding the right tool for the job, right? So there are many penetration testing tools available, right? Yeah, free classes are very good. Very, very good. Because, and again, after you take the classes, go back, because learn. There are a lot of stuff I'm saying now. I may be resonating with all of you in different angles, right? Because I also still take classes. I also go into classes and engage in classes where people teach. You get, there are classes on YouTube, classes on Udemy, Cisco platforms, all of those sites. Take those classes, but you need to narrow it down to what you want to achieve, because otherwise you'll be attending different classes. Narrow it down. This is what I'm hoping to achieve. You identify a skill set and look at the trainings that build those skill set, and you realize that you need facility, you need infrastructure, you need to have, whether you like it or not, in this our field, you need to have robust systems, processor, RAM, you need them. That, and then also some hard drive. And you may need to also have to interact with a lot of VirtualBox, containers, and the rest of them. So what some people do is that if they don't have it, they pay for it online. Like AWS offers some platforms, GitHub offers some platforms. So you interact with them, you learn. Sometimes you get your hand burned, but it's okay. So let's get back to what I was trying to say. Naturally, the tools are plenty. So there are many penetration testing tools available, and some of them do many things. So you want to find out what this tool does for you. It is almost a full-time job keeping track of the tools, one, their functions, and how to use them. In addition, new tools are becoming available every day, and the old ones are becoming obsolete. Again, remember that these are tools now. I mentioned something about how that from the day something was produced and you drop it into the market, the tendency for it to almost become obsolete is high because the terrain which is going to work evolves. See us now talking about CNG cars, right? People are talking about, at some point it was hybrid, and typically people always jump at the new thing without having much. A lot of people who just jump at the latest thing. At one point it was hoverboard. Everybody does hoverboard. Even people who never chop belly food, right? So penetration testers tend to settle on tools that have worked well for them. So if you go to certain forum or fora, they will tell you use this tool because for that fora or that particular forum, that tool worked for them. You need to find out where they are living, the operating systems that they are actually looking at, right? The use cases where those things work. It is impossible to learn and use all the tools that are available. I've had people, when they bring out their box of tools, when I mean box, when they come out with their hard drive that contains the tools that they use, you just wonder. So it is very useful to understand what the most popular tools do and what risks they are built or best suited for, right? Or what tasks, sorry. So from there, you can try them and learn them. Let me put it this way, try them, learn them, then decide if you want to put them in your penetration testing toolbox. So at the end of our engagement, it is possible that all of you would have to choose different tools, and this is dependent on your interaction with them. Because at some point when the class was out, I kept quiet at answering some questions because I didn't know how I was going to answer. If I answer them according to my leaning, it would make the learning very somehow. It's like academics forcing people to do professional courses. Saying this is the one that is raining, this is the one that is raining and all. All right, so these are the different kinds of tools. Aha, aha, now so, now so. See, that's where he is. Can imagine all of those. Okay, so there are different tools that are used for different penetration testing use cases, right? Use cases for penetration. Remember, a use case, like I said earlier, is a scenario, right, that identifies the processes involved at achieving or the events that lead to achieving the end game. Okay, there's an actor, there's the scenario, a lot of stuff. So If you're doing reconnaissance, for example, what is your style of reconnaissance? What do you want to get? If you're doing enumeration, for example, which is listing of, perhaps the potential things that are existed there, maybe the weakness that are listed there. What tool? What's your approach for vulnerability scanning, credential attacks, persistence attack, configuration compliance, evasion, decompilation, forensics, debugging, and all of those things. These are different steps or different scenarios. No, not scenarios. Okay, so let's call it scenarios. These are different scenarios, right? What tools would you want to use for all of this? There are quite a number of tools. And if somebody were to ask you for reconnaissance, somebody will tell you, use this, use that. But like we said, identify for your scenario where you work, what works, right? Now, um, we mentioned setting operating system at the beginning, and we talked about Kali, how that you can install Kali. Somebody here is using Kali install because his own virtualization was not allowed on his operating system, so he's installed Kali. Now, you'd realize that for you who's using Kali, if you're not careful, you get lost. You can actually sit down from morning and you're engrossed. By the time you realize what is happening, it is 4 p.m. Really. Or let's even sit down, might be too. Maybe you come back in the evening and you say, let me just try something. And it gets interesting, catches your attention, and you're navigating and checking and checking libraries, going forward to do research and all. Before you know what's happening, it's morning. Okay. So several Linux distros or distribution include numerous penetration testing tools. So let me pause there a little and explain why. Remember that Linux operating system was an operating system that was developed for the purpose of for developers, so to say. Of course, we had people who had operating systems but will not expose its content to you. It's source code to you. So they lay hold or they lay claim to certain dominance in the field. Of course, some people came together and said, hey, you know what? Why do that? Then they made available. They actually went through Unix, got its source code and worked on it, of course, giving credit to Unix source code. So the purpose of the distribution that we have, or what we call is it versions now? Yeah, versions in Windows, in Linux, or open source, they're called distros or distributions, right? They come with a lot of things, and these things are tools that are used for testing. They were not necessarily at the time built for any form of attack. They were just testing to say, hey, why do I use something? At this point when I'm clicking, what exactly am I doing? Dragging and dropping, what exactly am I doing? So they went behind and observed the conversation that the application itself was having with the shell. Say, come, why not just make them available to say, hey, when you want to do this, a combination of this, and this achieves that. Okay, so they started embedding certain tools within it, which you can actually activate at the point of installation. You can activate or choose the features that you want to work. So they're very, very good. The purpose of this distribution is to make it easier for individuals to get started with. Now, please note, this is not why they made those tools available. Penetration testing was not why. The tools were made available because they wanted you to have control of your operating system and its interaction with other dependencies. So, but with time, you realize that those tools could actually get to fetch you information regarding how far gone this process is into the network or into the application. So, with regards to that, I just wanted to put that in perspective. So, without having to worry about software dependencies and capability issues that could be introduced when installing and deploying such tools. You know that sometimes you download some tools, right, for less of the Windows environment, and then you're asked to get this to work with that. You have to get this to work with that. So here are some very popular operating systems that have capabilities of penetration testing. That's the best I'm going to put it. We have Kali Linux, we have Parrot operating system, we have Black Arc Linux, and we have Black Arc in Docker. So these are the ones that are very available for you at any time at Kali Linux. You can download them from kali.org. Okay. Okay. Let's move forward. So this is Kali. Okay. One of the most popular penetration testing distribution in the industry because it contains all of these applications. So you can see it. Information gathering, vulnerability analysis, web application analysis, database assessments, password attacks. So let me try to explain it this way. Hey, please permit me, it's just for the purpose of explanation. There are people that grow up and their parents teach them everything from making of soap to making of candle to making of Vaseline or petroleum jelly, right, to farming their food, to cooking the food, to making their firewood. Then there are people who grow up just going to a cupboard and opening and picking it. This is not saying that one is bad or the other one is wrong. But you realize that when you throw these two people into the world, the people that survive more under certain circumstances are the ones whose parents taught them or who grew up in an environment where they had to learn everything. That's what we're saying here with these operating systems. They were not, and they are not training you because they want you to become harsh in the society. When operating systems like this were built, they were built with them not having to depend on other things to help solve a problem or two. Compare that to the other operating systems like your Windows or Mac operating system. They were built, right, hiding all of these conversations, which actually happens at the back end of every operating system. All of this is shielded from you from interacting with it. So your interaction with this operating system here opens your eye to the conversation that occur, and there are certain exchange of information that occur that helps in all of this. It helps in information gathering, helps in analyzing vulnerability, help in web application analysis. Typically, based on your training, somebody is talking, you can say, Kai, this guy, they lie. You say, Kai, no, how it mean as streets. Simply because the way you grew up, you've been exposed to these interactions, and you can tell that this interaction is phony, it's not healthy. You can tell. That's what these operating systems are built like, okay? So they are built with these features in them, and you can choose to activate them, use them as you want or not, okay? Based on Debian, I've forgotten what this means. Is it something license? I've forgotten what it means, right? It it evolved from previous penetration testing Linux distributions like Whoopix, Wax, and Blacktrack. Kali Linux is general something public, right? Okay, so somebody's asking a question. So MITRE ATT&CK is one, is a framework. So there, somebody's asking a question. It says, as a pen tester, is it necessary for me to know or to master? So for master, I'll say, but no, I'll say yes, right? It's not necessary to master it because there are quite a number of other framework available there. Remember, MITRE's approach is just listing what they are suggesting to you could be your flow of thought when you are doing pen testing. You get, so it's not saying that you must, right? You mustn't. You could actually start, right? And from there, you realize that as time goes on, that it works in certain places. And for you, you might just need to reorder the sequence in which they follow. So it will help. It will help. MITRE ATT&CK will help. Yeah. So Kali Linux comes with hundreds of tools, and the community is constantly, let's put it this way, tweaking those tools, creating more tools and adding it to new versions or new versions, new updates. So each time you update, you get some stuff. So this is the menu that we have for Kali. Okay, so let's move on. This is Parrot. It's based on Debian and focused on penetration testing, digital forensics, and privacy protection. So that means the tools that are here focus on exposing the details that occur at the point of applications or softwares interacting, and it reveals the identity of those interactions. So you're able to tell with proper training and that's a proper training, you know what to focus on. Now, digital forensics is becoming the main thing. Privacy protection is huge. So the figure shows a screenshot of Parrot. This is Parrot. Then this is our Black Arc Linux. Came out in 1900. Came out. It has a feature of somebody asking a question. Okay, no. Okay, the pen tester, is it necessary to, okay, no. So like I said, MITRE is what you need to, you can actually I'm not saying it's a must or not a must, but you can add it to what you need to know. So this Black Arc is a Linux distribution that comes with more than 1,900 security penetration testing tools. Okay, and that's a Black Arc application menu ecosystem. So this is what it looks like for Black Arc, right? And this is how to run in a Docker container. So a Docker container is typically those space that you are given on a virtual machine, right? Where you dock your device. Okay. Right. So any questions so far? Okay, so let's go on. So common tools for from this point on now, they begin to list for you tools to use. There are quite a number of them. So, for example, for reconnaissance, right? You know, there's passive. We discussed it. I think it was module 2 or 3. I can't remember. There's passive and active reconnaissance, right? Passive reconnaissance involves attempting to gather information with about a victim by using public information record, but not using any active tool. So you are not launching a tool. They are just like WHOIS, all of those tools, DNS information, right? They just give you as many information about the person. There's also the open source intelligence, right? And it's actually a framework as well. Um, just identifies what to look out for whenever you are downloading. I think also I dropped the link, I think. I don't know whether I did. Okay, so these are things. What you are looking at is maybe domain name lookup, NS lookup, host, and dig, right? And all of these things, these are tools. These are tools. So here, this NS lookup for this guy is a server. That's his address. The non-authoritative answer is all of these things are listed as, it's various names. So this is a name, domain name, database. Okay. So this is for reconnaissance. Example is this. Okay, this is an enumeration, right? So this is dig using the dig utility. Dig is simply domain information grouper. Okay, it's an acronym for domain information grouper. It normally just is used for querying DNSs simply. So I say dig this guy, give me his domain name information. So it does a listing of every website. So there's a name, there's a name, then there's an IP address of that particular name. So it does this for, so it is doing digging. WHOIS is a tool for reconnaissance. We talked about that before. WHOIS is actually um it's just is a tool. It's actually a utility that no, a utility that you can use to search out anybody. You can search whoever, right? Public, these are publicly available information. I explained why. At the point where this was allowed to become what people could use, or that the information about this is actually left in the public domain, they observed that certain people were defrauding some other people. People who provide resources online were having a great day at they're just color being people, best way to put it. So queries were done within that community to say, "Hey, you know what? Why not expose this guy so that we know who is who?" It's like having a street where shop owners are. Then you come to the shop to buy something, they collect your money, don't give you the product. And it's like, okay, who is this guy? And then never there is telling you, I don't know the guy. So we're saying now that anybody who owns a shop in that place must be registered, we must know who the person is. So in case the person defrauds someone, we have his details, phone number, address, and all. So that's like what happens in the case of WHOIS, why the information for WHOIS is made available. So if somebody were to have any form of interaction with any service or any, person online or any service deliverer or provider online, we want to know who the person is. If you boast to be somebody providing services and you are going to be making your service public, then of course the information about who you are should be also be public. So in the event that there's some form of discrepancy with your operations, we should track and be able to, solve that problem. So, right, unfortunately, because of the European GDPR, the WHOIS database has been restricted to protect privacy. Okay, so there's a lot with it. Okay, so this is a fingerprinting organization with collated archives. That's FOCA. These are other tools for reconnaissance. All of these are tools that you can use. Like, so I'm going to be going through them, right? Because I want to focus on explaining some things, especially those steps with respect to tool analysis, code and tool analysis. That's what I want to look at. Here's Harvester. It's another tool used to enumerate DNS information about a given hostname or IP addresses. So it's able to go ahead to query data sources, right? All data sources, all of them. Okay. Harvester. That's what Harvester. This is what it looks like. This is actually on Kali. Okay. Again, remember all of those tools are listed under. Well, let's go back there. Let me show you. So you could be information gathering. That could be listed there. So I don't know which one here is clicked. So I can click on information gathering and then see a listing of what I can achieve with that particular tool in Kali. Okay. And there's Shodan. We've talked about Shodan at the beginning. Is a search engine for devices connected to the internet, right? And it can list It can scan the internet and expose the information, right? Especially the ones that interact with APIs. So those ones are there. This is a tool that can be used to gather information about potentially vulnerable systems exposed to the internet. Okay, so Shodan is a tool. We talked about it at the beginning as well. So this is how to install it. No, sorry, Smart Install to install Shodan. So once you do this on Kali, you can most of this require that you be online to be able to install it. So you can do Shodan install, and it tells you all of this top 10 results for this particular organization. So you can go ahead and install, and then go ahead and use it. So this Shodan-H. Now, in case you don't know how this works, you can actually man Shodan, which is the manual about Shodan. It will list to you what it has, and also what we call switches. All of this dash something dash A dash B. There are switches that indicate the functions, right? When you add it to the Shodan as a command. There's Multigo, gathers information from public records. So again, remember, these are tools. So they're not telling you use this. So as you advance or interact with them, this Multigo looks somewhat like OSINT, right? It's able to list, it has some output like that, and list a lot of things for you. So there's a community edition, there's a professional edition. So you're going to get the best of most of these applications. The professional editions actually work more. Okay, they have some protections, but the community editions actually reveal the same thing that you can find online on some platforms, right? And Recon NG, right? There is a menu-based tool that can be used to automate information gathering of OSINT, open source intelligence. So it has modules. Again, I'm just going through them, like I said, so that I can get to what I want to explain. So the census, okay, is based. This again, we're looking at, these are tools for passive reconnaissance, right? Just one. Then tools for active reconnaissance, we have Nmap. I think we attempted using Nmap one of those days, right? Nmap or ZenMap. Um, eh, what it does is a tool. So it does active reconnaissance, meaning it is launching some form of probe to a specific IP address or a service and returning back with some information regarding the ports that are available, the IP addresses that are active there, and the IP addresses that are also responding, and also the ports that are active on each of those IP addresses or the services that are being used. So this is Nmap. This is Nmap. This is Zen. This is ZenMap. Okay, this is Nmap. What's the difference? Well, I think it's just Outlook. They fetched somewhat similar thing. It's just understanding what they display and how to use them. And this is enum for Linux, enumerator for Linux. This is for enumeration. Simply lists, in this case now, if you here is I don't know what -v is, but this is a switch. So enum for Linux -v on this IP address. So it's going to be doing an enumeration for me. So what's -v now? Can I get that? All of these switches. Okay, so it's domain name. Okay, so attempting to get domain name with command. -a is for names. So let me not just guess what I don't know. So bottom line, there are tools that are used for interactions and also gathering information. This is for active reconnaissance. So here are these are vulnerability scanning. So I think the rest is what you can actually look at because it just lists tools. So let's use productive time to explain some things. These are tools for vulnerability scanning, lots of tools, go through them, tools, and the rest of them. What I want to focus on is actually to look at credential attack. Yes. Verbose, thank you. Verbose, thank you. Detailed, thank you. So, okay, yeah. So, ever heard of John the Reaper? Maybe you've heard of Jack the Reaper. Maybe as something said. Cain and Abel. These are for password cracking or credential gathering. There's Hydra as well. John the Reaper is actually a very good tool. This is what John the Reaper looks like. So these are different formats that he does of all kinds of encryption. Remember we said, I don't know whether I was here, we're discussing that, hey, there's some encryption that are obsolete, some are very good, and blah, blah. And I said, well, everything is actually as strong, right, until it is cracked. There's nothing that cannot be cracked. It takes some time. Okay. So this is John the Reaper. It does password cracking. It's an offline password cracker. This is part of the reason why now people don't allow passwords to actually even be encrypted. No, to be displayed. You know that even if it's encrypted, it can be displayed in dots or asterisks. Somebody can copy those and do a lot of stuff with it. Um, these are tools for credential attack, tools. Let's look at the other tools for persistence. So in module 8, we talked about remote desktop, right? Um, remote access protocol to communicate with compromised systems and perform lateral movement. Remember, we talked about all of those. So these are some things that the tools that can be used. X-Server forwarding, VNC, Apple Remote Desktop, and the Microsoft Remote Desktop Protocol. Okay, so our tools for persistence. Then for evasion, which is dodging, like trying to avoid being seen, tools like Veil, Tor, proxy chain encryption, encapsulating and tunneling using DNS, and so on, right? So this launch Veil, okay, it's just launch a Veil. It's a framework, right? And it's I think there's Metasploit somewhere towards the end. Again, these are all tools, so you can just read about, just look at them and again, remember, choose the tool that works for you. Tor is used um, to attack certain websites. It actually works by routing, so it needs IP addresses, right? And it does a lot of relay. It's actually like a peer-to-peer, right? And the Tor is actually, I think is, okay, there it is, the onion router. Remember the idea of the onion? Onion is a bulb that has layers. And if you hold an onion and you're peeling off the layers, what normally happens to you is that you cry because there's a reaction. I think they say there's sulfur or something, which your eye reacts to, and then your tear buds begins to, emit tears. So it's inferring in a way that that tool works like that. It has layers. So it's constantly changing the way it routes traffic. So its plan is to ensure that you don't know which one is which. Okay, so it's a tool. And then I think let me also say that whichever tool you pick, you can do some research on the tool. There's usually a philosophy around why the tool is named what it is named, either because of a story around a particular character. For example, um, Trojan horses, right? Of course, we know that Trojan horses are actually malwares that attack systems, but there's a story around why it's called a Trojan horse. It's actually after a particular thing that happened in a city called Troy, and how those guys were able to penetrate Troy. And it's exactly how that tool works. There was a time when we had a particular tool, is it a tool or software, that we used to use for burning CDs. It's called Nero. I don't know how many of you used it. And had to, it was a tool that worked just like how the Emperor Nero treated some people. He gathered some people, locked them in a Colosseum, is a stadium or so, and burned them. So that's exactly how that application works. Yeah. Yeah. Good old days. Yeah. Nero. So there's also a tool. Okay, this is Tor, the hacking tool. This is Tor. The Tor client encrypts data multiple times and sends it through a network or circuit that includes randomly selected relays of this of the onion router. So Tor is the onion router. Okay. These are tools, encryption tools for evasion, can do encryption, quite a number of tools, and they can be in plain sight. Exploitation framework, yeah. So there's Metasploit. Somebody's asking a question. Yes, exactly. You're a dark web guy, Abby. And there are certain features, there's there are certain so this is what I would advise. As you mentioned, dark web. You know how there are some places in your city that you don't just go looking very nice. Because once you go, you may come back naked. You don't go looking like you're fresh. Some of you go to the market, you want to go and buy some things. We're getting to that time of the year. Some people just wear short knicker, wear slippers, park their car somewhere and enter the market. That is like taking a browser that is rugged into a dark place. There's a way you speak in the market, they can tell that, this guy will go fit slap this guy. So I have some group of people in my class, they are foreigners who came from neighboring countries to school here. And so one of them came to meet me the other day and said that he went to the market to buy a laptop. I said, "Hi, yeah." You don't go submit yourself. One, you don't understand the language in the market. You went and you were speaking English, and then your what they call it now? What do I call him now? Tone. His accent revealed that he was not a foreigner. So he called me from there and said, please, sir, send me a picture on WhatsApp and say, please check this laptop. They are telling me this is the cost of the laptop. I say, where are you? I say, leave there now. Right? So I'm trying to explain why Tor is actually the only browser you can use on the dark web, because it's constantly changing its IP address, as it were. Or within it's actually structured that actually keeps changing source, destination keeps changing. So if you go to the dark web with normal Explorer, sorry, Edge, or which that very common one, Google Chrome, you will get chromed. Okay, so yes, it's actually the only browser. Yes, it's actually the only browser that can surf the dark web. So dark web is actually a place where you can imagine joining a net. What the dark web is, ladies and gentlemen, is simply a network of people. Yeah, 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 true. Yeah, true. Of course, they'll keep cracking it. The Tor, somebody says it's advisable to add VPN to provide extra layer when using Tor. I once read a publication where FBI were able to track nose or Tor. See, even if it were not FBI, you get, I'm sure usually these publications need to come out to let you understand that these FBI guys, you don't have any hiding place. That's what they normally do with those propaganda. But we need to understand it from the point of view of we who are in this field. You know, there's a way you can sell story to children and they just believe that you as a parent, you can buy them everything until the day they go to the market and say, daddy buy or mommy buy. Then you start narrating story around how that the ATM card is not here, network is bad and all, right? So yes, a matter of fact, even any access to the dark web without having to run a VPN is dangerous. But you must also identify who the VPN provider is. They may have their own policies around going or not going. Okay, they themselves. Okay, Proton, nice. Okay, so you guys are okay. I've been talking to gurus nowadays. People left me on this side just talking as if I know everything. All right, so imagine that you go to a network and everybody in the network have this knowledge that we're talking about. So you can imagine everybody running operating systems that are not the regular ones. Of course, I mentioned, right, that the network or the internet, as it is known, is built on the infrastructure or the model of client server. Now, that means somebody must be asking, somebody must be receiving or giving. At the point of asking, there are certain credentials you provide. Those credentials reveal your identity, the structure of everything that you are using, the application. Just imagine you going to the market. Picture it this way. You are, let's say, a boti who lives in maybe you know the place, like some highbrow area where you stay. Then you find yourself in the market, putting on slippers, your skin is showing, then you're holding your hand, you're holding your nose. You are revealing your structure once you walk into the market. There are people who are in that market looking at everybody who's in the market, trying to identify who they can slap for that day for their own daily bread. It's typically the same thing that happens when applications interact, because you are going as a client to make purchase from a provider who is maybe a server. So the way you are presented, right, is exactly how you're going to be approached. It's the same thing that happens when we're discussing these devices. Every device is built on, is the architecture of every device is hardware that runs an operating system. Operating systems has applications on them. The next question is, what is the structure, or let's put it this way, the logic behind the operation of each of all of those things we talked about, the operating system, for example, the applications that run on it. What is the logic? When they interact, what is the process that they follow? Right? So when you go to certain places, certain webs, certain networks, your interaction, because every client must interact. We just click and get, but there are interactions that happen at the backside where applications or codes are interacting with each other. So there are certain codes that are exchanged that can reveal the security level of what you are going to the web with, which is why you're not advised to go to the dark web or any other web that you don't trust with applications that run browsing or downloading or uploading that look very regular and have very, very limited restraining strength from those hard places. Just attempted explaining all of those. So before I run, so there's Metasploit. So it's simply what's it called now? Post exploitation is an application, is the software that contains several modules, right? Auxiliary modules, encoders, exploits, and the rest of them. Typically, it's just an operating system that has the capacity to expose interactions that are meta, meaning interactions that are not seen with the very regular eye. So it's used to exploit those conversations. So look at all of these are tools. I'm just trying to jump through them so that I can go to what I want to explain. Then there's okay, yeah. Okay, Metasploit. This is a Metasploit. How to create a bind, list of view, and the rest of them. Getting password and hashes, exploitation frameworks, and the rest of them. Okay, so there's beef. Okay, that's what this guy was asking earlier. How to download. Somebody said he was trying to get beef. Okay, you can get it on your. Somebody asked a question in the group, I think in the class. I saw that question earlier. I was in church earlier, so when I came back, I saw somebody asking a question about how to install beef. I don't know I don't know if you're in class, whether you got it. If you're in class, whether you're able to get it. Just for the benefit of explanation, is a framework for web application. Is actually called, I think, it's um, browser exploitation framework. Okay, so can you hear me now? A fluctuation happened. My network went off. I'm back now, though. Okay, great. Great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, somebody's asking a question. I saw a question. I don't know that I missed it. Okay, thank you. I saw a question. Let me see the question there. Okay. It's okay, 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 okay. Okay, no, okay. That was something you said earlier. That it's advisable to add VPN to provide extra layer. So I was trying to explain beef. Beef is browser exploitation framework. So it's a pen testing tool that allows it focuses on web browsers actually, and every attack that happens on the web-based attack. So its focus is, I think, in its design, it was actually designed to access the security posture of every application that is going to be used on the web, and also interactions between end-to-end users, particularly if you're using a browser to access applications. So you can actually download it. So there's quite a number of things that they do. So I'm just going through it so that I can get to what I want to explain, which is the crux of the matter. All of these are tools and how to use the tools. Common decompilation tools that you can use. IDA. I think this is the last slide or so. Yeah. No, okay, this for forensics. So it talks about certain tools that are used for forensics. I think we also talked about those for web. This is not my focus. These are what you can read. Okay. So I want to try to explain scenography tools. So great. So this is what I want to look at, like a tool and code analysis, then we'll be done. I think this is officially our last class together. Any other class would be to discuss the capstone project, which is what we don't need to have class for that. That conversation can happen in the group, in the WhatsApp group, so we can actually be able to deal with other things. We've stayed too long on this class. So I was attempting to look at the breakdown of how do I put it now? The elements of code analysis, which is particularly what this chapter is about. The last part focused on the tools. It didn't tell us the analysis of each of those tools or the code that is embedded in the tool. The first part attempted explaining what the importance of doing some analysis for your code, understanding the composition of each code or each tool. We said also part of it that it would be wise for us to grow in skill to the point where we can develop our tools or understand each tool and the embedded code and try to know what it is focused or targeted at. Okay, so I talked about static code, and at every stage of every code, this is where I want to dwell on, then we'll conclude. That the stage of every code, right, we have about, think about, 7 from what I have listed here, which I'm going to try to explain as a summary of what we're dealing with. Okay, so I talked about static code analysis, talked about dynamic code analysis, talked about security analysis, talked about code quality assessment, talked about performance analysis, we talked about dependencies analysis, and then we concluded with, I think the last part I talked about integration analysis, how it can interact with other guys. What we're focusing on here is just understanding that each tool or code, right? It's good to understand the role that it plays in enhancing how reliable the tool is, how secure the tool is, and what performance it can do. And this is for the purpose of improving on these tools, right? So if you're looking at best practices, right, every team is supposed to identify all of this. This is part of what most of those developers go through to make those tools available. It's a community effort. So you don't see any tool available just because it needs to be available for testing or penetration testing. And a good thing to know is that there are different things you are doing in the whole process of penetration testing, which we listed, I think, in module 3 or 4, right? Having identified your scope, there are things you are looking at, and there are various tools for them. So the option of the tool to use is largely dependent on your capacity to use the tool. So we started by saying for today, talking about static code. A static code is a code who is not being in an execution state. Okay, so if a code or the source code, or let's say this tool no, not the tool now, the code, because the tool itself comprised of codes that are working to achieve a particular function in the tool. So static code analysis would be the one. This is where you are actually working on a code without executing the code. So that means what you're looking at, you are trying to identify the code itself, like looking at the code. Remember, a code is a script, right? Is a script that is written, is like a software. So this software is like a script written to achieve a particular function. So it in a static state is not running yet. Okay. So what you're looking at is the syntax of that code, the structure. Structure focuses on maybe the tool, where it is going to, and the action is going to carry out, right? And then, of course, there must be standards for every code development. Okay, so every developer is able to catch errors early in the life cycle of developing a software or a code, right? And it typically what's happening at this stage of code development, code development is simply detecting bugs, right? And then being able to adhere to code standards. Maybe even if there are violations in the style that the code is written, you detect all of those. So you're able to analyze potential codes for different things you want to use, vulnerabilities, and so on. Okay. So you can also look at, we talked about dynamic code analysis. This is typically when the code is in execution. So this is unlike static code, right? So dynamic code analysis is where the application is running, or the code itself is running, right? And at this point that is running, what you're attempting to look is evaluate its runtime behavior. Okay, so now it is running. How is it behaving? Is it like interaction with other system memories, right? How does it use my RAM? How does it use my processor? What components what components of my computer or my device is it using? So you are typically looking at the flow of execution. And this will also reveal a lot of bugs if there are any errors, for example, during the execution stage. Because just imagine a car standing still, right, doesn't reveal as much as a car moving. There's a lot you can tell with a car moving, right, different from when a car is standing. So typically, I'm looking at errors that may arise on account of it being in a running stage, being in execution stage. Okay. So then there's also security analysis. This is where you're basically looking at identifying the weaknesses that are in the code, or let's say the vulnerabilities that are in the code. And please note, vulnerabilities doesn't necessarily mean that it is bad. It's just perhaps its capacity to handle what you asked it to handle. That in itself is a weakness, is a vulnerability. So you want to find out whether this particular code, right, which is in running, can handle what is being asked to run. So that way you are looking at the fact, or looking at trying to identify that this particular code or software or application complies with security standard and practices. Of course, there must always be a framework that guides. And why this is so is because once it complies, then it reduces the risk of breaches that can happen in that application being in use. Okay. So another thing is, I think the fourth one I talked about, I don't know if I'm getting it as in that order. The fourth one is with respect to code quality assessment. Typically here, you want to find out the code is what we call clean, right? Clean means in the code being run, or is it run or ran? Code being run, right? There is no, how do I put it now? There's no error in it. So it is readable and it's easy to maintain. Okay. So you're able to reduce a lot of mistakes or modifications that may happen to the code, either by you or by somebody who's an attacker. Then I think we looked at performance analysis, basically looking at how efficiently the code runs, right? The time of, in terms of speed, and then the resources it uses while it is running. Okay. If there's any bottleneck, you can identify that. Now, looked at dependency analysis, which is basically analyzing external libraries, where if you import libraries from outside into the particular code, libraries, of course, are collections of things that you can, resources that you can actually use to build, or you introduce it into another library, whether it's able to work. This is largely focusing on its compatibility with those codes. So you can tell whether that code or the code you're introducing into it is up to date or out of date or is compatible, right? I think lastly, we talked about integration analysis. This is where we're looking at that the code integrates smoothly with external systems, whatever system you bring into the place. That way, if it's able to interact with it without any hitch, then you reduce the chance of failure of that particular application. So with that, I think we can say that we've in essence, for the purpose of class, we've actually done this. So I would advise that you do the second part, which is the aspect that focuses on the tools that are used for different kinds of penetration testing. Okay. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end. I don't know if there's any question that we have to answer or to ask. In the absence of any other, I think we may just have to conclude. Today is Sunday. You all have things to do by tomorrow. So in principle, we're done. We'll have to suggest in the group chat when next we may have a class to discuss capstone project concerns. Maybe there may be people amongst us who have actually started already. We'll get them to share concept, because this is a classroom and it's the community of professionals in various fields. We have ISOC, we have NCS scattered around the country. So let's see how that goes. Thank you all very much for your time and trusting me with the time to help communicate the things that you perhaps have already mastered over years. But maybe one of these days I'll be in a class where one of you is the instructor, and I'll be glad to be there. Thank you very much. So see you all in the future. We've actually been able to make available the recordings from module 1 to 5. 6 to this module will be available. So for this recording, I'll add it to it. You get it hopefully by the end of tomorrow. Thank you all very much for your time. It's a pleasure being here with you all. Hope to see you in the physical forum in the future. Bye-bye.